Then limousines started showing up at my parents' house in Greenville, Texas, because these record company people wanted to meet me.
They were
and like
competition.
And it really started like this whole thing, and like this is still the 90s.
All right, so I'm Mark Turk, the founder of Beat for Beat, and I'm sitting here with Ben Kweller. How you doing?
Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, and tell us where we are this morning.
We are at Noise Co. Studio in Dripping Springs, Texas. This was an old barn originally. Well, it is a barn, but what it actually was a railroad station. It was part of the Missouri Pacific Railroad on 4th and Lavaca in Austin. And it was like 4 of these buildings long, and the train would go through it.
Whoa.
And there were 4 brothers, and each brother got a section of the railroad station. And so the brother that lived out here moved this section out here. So it was actually part of the Missouri MOPAC, Missouri Pacific Railroad Station. And now it's a recording studio.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and freshly renovated.
Freshly renovated. This is actually the first legit thing that we've ever recorded in this space.
I could smell the cedar still. It's still in the air.
Yes.
And this is a pretty old property. You were saying the house that's here on the property is from
1886. Yeah, the house was moved out here in 1981.
Oh, okay.
And apparently the house was built by the first treasurer of Texas, who I can't find much information on. I've tried to Google that. But I guess he built the house, and it was on West 6th Street in Austin.
Okay.
And when they were building MOPAC, the road, I guess they had to demolish a bunch of houses. And so this amazing dude, Bobby Stevens, who still lives in Dripping Springs, Bobby Stevens was driving by the house on West 6th Street and literally saw like the wrecking ball about to demolish it. And he was like, wait, what are you guys doing? And they're like, well, the bank says we got to tear this down. And he's like, well, can I have it? And they're like, if you give us $1,000, you can have it.
Whoa.
And so like back in 1981, and so he freaking like literally chainsawed the middle of the house, like the middle hallway, and put the house in 2 halves and hauled it on 2 flatbed trailers. I don't know how he did it, but basically that was 1981. So he moved the house here. He also moved this barn here. So everything is kind of an interesting property. It's just a bunch of stuff that's been moved here that people didn't want back in Austin. It's kind of cool because it's like I'm still in Austin. I got like these old structures.
Yeah, now that the MOPAC thing was before our time, but they did go right through a historical part of town.
Yes,
and did knock down a bunch of old houses.
Exactly.
And the trend continues, as a matter of fact. But
turns out.
But we're not here to talk about that.
Nope.
We're here to talk about Beat for Beat's mission, which is putting aspiring musicians together with low income students and giving them free education. And so, I wanted to just kind of start off that we met around music education.
We sure did.
Do you like? I just remember I got a phone call from you, and I was like, "Oh yeah, Ben Kweller, yeah, sure." But I guess somebody gave you my number.
I think it was Spanky gave me your number.
Okay.
Rachel, who's incredible.
Yeah, mutual friend of ours. Yeah.
Great drummer. Great educator. Great with kids. I've known her for many years, and she taught both of my boys drums, and then they wanted to get into guitar. And as a father who plays music, I was able to show my kids stuff, but you can only show your kids so many things before it's like, okay, Dad. Like, you know what I mean? So I was always big on like getting other educators involved. So Spanky was like, I know this great guitar teacher, Mark Turk, and you gotta call him up.
Okay.
And so I did.
Wow, sweet of her.
Yeah.
So I would go over to your house.
Yep.
And you were living in town. You had 2 properties right next to each other. I guess the back one was like your studio.
Yep.
And I'd go teach there. And
in the 04.
And I do have this memory of like, I was showing Dorian some Metallica, and like you came in like, what are you working on? And you just like shredded on guitar.
Oh.
And I was just like, what am I doing here?
Oh, please.
I was like, oh yeah, but no, I know I have my own kids, and
Yeah.
like there's like an emotional connection with parents and kids where it's like, well, you could show them stuff, but they kind of, you're also like the disciplinarian and this and that.
Right.
So it is great to like
Yes.
bring in other educators, but at the same time when I started that is when I started it's Beat for Beat. It was Beyond the Grade.
Yeah.
And I would talk about that with you, and so you came to our first concert.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah,
ABGB.
at ABGB, and then we filmed it, and you loaned us some music.
Yeah.
Mean to Me, which has like such an awesome like rock intro. And so we put that with. I was like, oh, that's so good.
That's awesome.
So yeah, people got when we were kind of introduced to the internet or whatever.
Yeah.
They got that was
good.
That was a great riff to kind of kick it off.
Yeah, that was a fun song to write, Mean to Me, because it's just a big open E chord, starts it off. And that was from an album called Go Fly Kite that I put out in 2012. And the album starts with that song, so the first thing you hear is a big E chord. The album cover is an E chord, like tab style.
Yeah.
And all of that is really because it goes back to music education. The first chord my dad ever showed me was an E chord, probably an E minor because it's less fingers, But then you learn your E major.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like, that album was a fun album because it was kind of me going back to some of my basics and just like being a kid and, just.
Yeah, for me, it was a different version of you than I had heard before. I was like, oh, this guy wants to rock.
Yeah, totally.
And then I got to know you and I was like, oh, he is rock, but so let's kind of hear your story, and as it pertains to like our students and stuff, like your little
the origin story of Ben Kweller.
Little Ben sees an instrument and goes. So how'd you get?
I'll tell you it all.
Tell me.
I'll tell all of you. Not friends. So my story really starts around the age of 7. And really the biggest moment, so leading up to that was always music. I guess you could say it started in the cradle because apparently, so I was born in San Francisco, and my dad loves to tell this story how when I was born, they were doing, the hospital was, I was born at a place called Letterman Navy Hospital. Okay, so it was a military hospital. My dad at the time was a resident doctor. He's a medical doctor, my dad. And he was doing his residency, but he was part of the Rural Health Service, which was a government program that basically were back in the late 70s. The federal government would pay for medical school as long as you served in a rural community for a few years after you graduated. So he was part of this thing, and then because it was government, I guess he worked out of a military hospital. So anyway, they were conducting this like research experiment on newborn babies about music therapy. So he always says the reason that I really got the music bug is because he was putting headphones on my mom's belly, playing Hendrix. So like it was all Jimi Hendrix all the time. Like that's my dad's favorite. Like Beatles and Hendrix are the two main. And so like that was kind of a funny thing. And then like even like when I was born, I was jaundiced, and so they had to like put me in an incubator and like bake me a little longer, and they're playing Hendrix. So it was like I was kind of born to Hendrix. So that's kind of maybe where it all starts.
This would be like good parenting tip.
Yeah, that
right?
Music therapy for real. It might just work. So anyway, but really what happened was when I was about 7 years old, my dad got his drums out of the attic. My dad's a drummer. And he said, Ben, I'm going to teach you how to play a beat. Because really he wanted to play guitar with somebody. He always was like, he said, well, all drummers are frustrated guitar players, which is really kind of funny to think about. But So he wanted to jam with someone. So he taught me how to play a beat. And he was like, okay, there's 4 beats in music. Just count 1 to 4 and then do it again. You know, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And he would say, okay, your hi-hat hand is going to play all 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And then your foot's going to play on 1 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And then your other hand is in the holes doing 2 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I learned to be, and notice, for real drummers out there watching, they notice that I'm playing with an open grip. That's because I'm left-handed. So to make things even more confusing, my dad's right-handed, so he set up the drums for him, you know, to play right-handed. So most drummers would cross over, and your dominant hand is the hi-hat hand. So if I was right-handed, but I'm left-handed, so it's more comfortable for me to play like this. Anyway, that's how I learned. But I use my right foot because I learned on the right.
Yeah.
So my drumming thing, there are a few drummers, not many, that actually play like that. Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys, apparently I've heard, played like that, which is kind of cool because Dennis was dope. So my dad sets up his drums, teaches me how to play a beat. So every day when he would get home from work, for about a year or so, we would play every night. And we had a little repertoire of like 7 or 8 songs, mainly Jimi Hendrix or the Beatles or Bruce Springsteen. And then also this artist named Nils Lofgren, who is a huge influence to me, and I'll explain that in a sec. And so basically that was really my first music education, was my dad teaching me how to play drums. And then when I was 8, I remember standing at my dad's turntable. We had one of those old like console turntables where it was like a piece of furniture with like tapestry, like drapes on the front of it, covering the speakers.
Keep your brandy in there.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a whole thing, you know. And I remember having the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour album on, and the song "All You Need Is Love" came on, and I remember being so moved by that melody that John Lennon wrote, and I remember exactly what it was. Let me see if I think that song, it might be an E. Yeah, all you need is love. Dun, 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 dun. All you need is love. Dun. This part. All you need is love. Love.
That big shift.
Yeah, that big. All you need is love. That chromatic half step up thing. Whatever that was, I was 8 years old and I just started crying. I was like, this is the most beautiful thing that I've ever heard. And so I just would play and move the needle back and listen to that song again. And I'd look at the piano and I'd look back at the record spinning and back at the piano. And I was like, okay, I want to do this. I want to make people cry. I don't even know what it was, like magic. Like, how am I crying from a sound that like of notes and melodies? And so I wanted to do that. And so stand by. So basically, so I went and sat down at the piano, and I remembered that like I knew one thing on the piano at that point. I was 8, and it was Heart and Soul, because that's what every American kid learns. You know, when you're a kid, white keys, dun 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 dun. And so I saw the pattern, which now we know is the key of C. But I just kind of memorized where to place my fingers according to where the black keys were. You just kind of, you know, so I'm like, okay, that. Then you go down, but you skip one. You go down again and skip one. And then you go up one to G. So what we're doing is C, A minor, F, and G. But to me, I'm just like thinking, I'm just seeing a pattern. Start here, skip, up one. Do it again. Down, skip. And
so at this point, you're just following the pattern.
I'm just
know what the notes are.
I didn't know the name. I didn't know the letters.
Yeah.
I just knew that when I skipped, it sounded the same every time, and I could predict what it would sound like according to the visual pattern. So like a lot of it was visual, but it was really the connecting the visual with the audio, you know? And so Heart and Soul. So I'm like, okay, so I'm just like grooving on that for a minute. And then I'm like, all right, well, what if I start at the same first chord, C, but instead of going to that second A minor, what if I go straight to the last chord, G, right? And then A minor, and then the third chord, F. So then I'm like, ooh, that sounds like Let It Be. And I'm like, dang. So Paul McCartney basically took Heart and Soul, like did it inside out and made this amazing thing called Let It Be, which is one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
8 years old.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, all
and
right.
It's a great song to play on piano.
Totally. Yeah. And so then I'm like, all right, y'all, talking to myself and Paul McCartney and whoever wrote Heart and Soul. I'm like, all right, what if I start at the first chord and I go to F, then A minor, then G, okay? And I'm like, ooh, that's a cool chord progression that I'd never heard before. Meanwhile, hundreds, thousands maybe of songs had been written with that progression. I can think of a Green Day song right now. I think When I Come Around might be that.
Yeah.
So anyway, but at 8, my ears, I'd only heard, so many songs. So that sounded so fresh. And so I'm like, cool. So I wrote a song with those chords and just started singing words about love and girls because that's what the Beatles sang about. So I just figured that's what I'm going to sing about. I didn't know about love or girls.
At 8?
At 8,
yeah.
No. But I figured, okay, I guess that's what you sing about. So that's what I started doing. So that I'm 8. And so then I probably wrote I don't know, 4 or 5 songs that year. And my parents were just kind of like, dang, like this is kind of weird and cool, and I remember I'd be out in the yard pretending like I was G.I. Joe or Rambo or something. And my mom would yell out, Ben, come play us some songs. And I'd run inside and sit at the piano, and her and her girlfriends would be like sitting there with their Bloody Marys. And I would just play these little love songs, and they'd be crying like, how does he know about love? How is he writing these things? And then I'd run back out, and that was kind of like my early childhood. That's where it began. Then when I was 10, I got my first guitar, Fender Stratocaster, made in Mexico, candy apple red. Hello. And my dad showed me an E chord and an A chord. On the piano you learn C first, on the guitar you learn E. Usually for me, but I think a lot of kids now maybe learn G or D. I mean, you gotta learn them all. Doesn't really matter where you start, but I'm always an E guy.
Yeah.
How do you teach E first? What's your...
it's like they call it like the caged C-A-G-E-D.
Yeah.
I teach usually G.
First.
Because you
That's
could do
the people's key.
That simple G, which is just holding down that one finger on the third fret, and boom, it's like, that sounds like a thing.
Yeah, totally.
And then it's like, well, now we're going to put your finger here to play simple C.
Yeah, it does. It segues to C very easily.
So you can do a 2 chord. Yeah. With little kids, you can do row, row, row your boat. They already know it. And it's like, we're just going back and forth.
Next thing you know, you're playing Brown Eyed Girl,
Hell yeah.
But yeah, so for me, it was E and A. And I wrote a song with those 2 chords, and it was just one thing after another. I mean, the songwriting was as simultaneous as me learning music. I just, for whatever reason, knew I wanted to create my own thing.
So you're very self-taught. It seems like people showed you, but you took it and ran.
I took it and ran, and my parents put me in piano lessons. But I went through there were probably 6 teachers in my small town in Greenville, Texas, and I went through all of them.
Right.
Because I never wanted to practice. It was the weirdest thing to them because it's like I didn't want to practice what they were giving me, but at the same time I'd come in and I'd be like, here's a song I made up. And then I'd play a whole full-fledged song. I mean, I was very limited and primitive on what I could play. It was all just 3-finger chords. But it was the last teacher that I went through, Judith Abbott, was the one who really saw that I had some talent, and was like, we can work with this. It's not what I would want because I want him to learn how to read Beethoven properly and perform it properly and curl his fingers properly. But she also didn't want to squelch, because not many kids come in with like a gift, and so that was really cool of her.
Did you ever learn Beethoven?
I mean, a little bit. For Elise, I knew a little bit.
Yeah, for Elise.
The one,
it's kind of a go-to.
It's the go-to, bro. I never got to the bridge. Like, once you get to where it starts going really crazy.
Yeah.
What a song. For Elise. I mean, that's just like a heavy metal tune, too, if you really look at it, because it's just A minor, E, A minor. Like, it's
what is heavy metal but classical?
That's all it is.
Turned up loud.
Beethoven was the first metal artist. Like, I really firmly believe that.
Yeah.
Because everything before him had to follow certain rules. I mean, he was kind of the first, maybe not the first. The first is always like a hard one, right? Because you got guys like Edison who, invented the light bulb. But then you have guys like Nikola Tesla who came before. There's always people before, and it's like, even like when you think about like Jack White, okay, wrote some great songs, but then I think of like where rock and roll was 30 years before him, and then where blues music was, right? Going to the first is hard.
And history stands on kind of like the most successful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because like Henry Ford didn't invent the vehicle, or the car, but he brought it to the masses. So he gets a lot of credit there, and then he should get credit for a lot of that. I don't discount that. So anyway, and that's the whole like record sales versus quality versus quantity. Anyway, there's a lot there to unpack. But what I was getting at, if I can remember, was
Judith, the piano teacher. She did not want to squelch your.
She didn't want to squelch it. Yeah. So I worked with her for probably 2 years or so, and then there was one guitar teacher in town who was actually a total legend, and he was an old blues guitarist. His name was Trig Ward. Trig, Trig. What a name!
Guitarist name.
And it was just this old dude, and he was incredible. And he had an old like 335 like hollow by like Chuck Berry. I mean, he probably played with Chuck Berry. Like, he was that kind of dude. Like, you walked into his little studio, which on the side of his house smelled like smoke. He and his wife would smoke in the house. Like, it was a vibe, and I tried to do some sight reading with him, but still it was more just like, hey, teach me some chords. And I don't know, we did more ear training. I was so determined in music, but like I was just doing it in a different way. It's a weird thing.
I mean, it's not an uncommon story for people who are just like really like called to music to say like, I need to kind of skip over all the notes and this and that, and just I want to kind of just get into it and find that emotion, that connection that you were talking about. Yes. So. For any aspiring songwriters out there, it's like, hey, follow your gut.
Yeah. Yes. You really have to. I mean,
and that's a lot of like, just to, talk a little bit about Beat for Beat. Like, we come into that after school situation and we are not teaching out of the book. It's the day one is like, what do you kids listen to? What do you want?
Yes.
Like, what inspires you? Because we want them to like have that feeling of like, hey, it was the Beatles for me. I'm like, sure. How are these dudes doing that? Here's these chords.
Yes.
But they make it sound amazing.
I know. And I think with kids too, like as primal as you can make it, the better. And that's why I like with the stuff you guys do with the buckets.
Yeah.
And, bucket drumming. And I mean,
our bucket drummers here off camera.
Bucket drummers. Yeah, I mean, that's really important. I'm a big drums first guy too. And I'm very thankful that my father was a drummer and taught me drums first. And so whenever parents come to me and they're like, hey, I want to get my child into music, like should we start with piano? Like, the classic was always start on piano. But honestly, if you don't have rhythm at the piano, that's going to really suck for you. Like, like when it comes time to do rests and just like to know how quarter notes work and eighth notes, and whole notes. So I'm a big fan of like, get a drum set. It might sound like pots and pans for a while, but hey,
pots and pans a good place to start. Yep. It's on the cheap.
That's it.
You know, you got drums sitting around your house.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, get those wooden spoons out.
That's it. And the bucket drum. I mean, that's the thing. Harbor Freight's always got a free bucket special going. I'm pretty sure, because I got one recently where I went and got a wrench and they gave me a free bucket.
Yeah,
Like, there you go.
Yeah, they're pushing those buckets.
They're pushing the buckets. Okay, another pivotal moment was in 1991. I was at the roller skating rink, and I'm skating around. I remember exactly where I was on the rink, and all of a sudden I hear and I'm like, huh? And so I literally skated to the side to like hold on to something and just listened to this, and I'm like, what is this music? And so then I skated her back around to the DJ booth. And I was like, bro, what is this? And he's like, oh, it's this new band Nirvana. And he held up the Nevermind CD with the naked baby underwater chasing the dollar bill.
Yeah.
I mean, like everything about that moment, the sound, the visual, everything just changed my life.
What were you listening to before Nirvana came out?
Yeah, it was so like mainly my dad's music. So like the stuff we would jam, like British Invasion stuff, Beatles, Hollies, a little Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Nils Lofgren, who I need to tie him in. If you can remember, don't let me forget to talk about why that's so important. But and if I keep rambling on my origin story long enough, it will get to Nils because he plays a crucial role. But yeah, so Nirvana, right, comes out, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is the best, because this was something for my generation, you know, where like, it's like until that point, it was all my father's generation stuff, which thank goodness, because that's some of the best music ever made, ever.
You got to skip over hair metal.
Yeah, I did. Well, so now I will say my first cassette was Stay Hungry by Twisted Sister.
Okay.
So there is music before Nirvana. It's just that didn't really change my life.
I remember the Quiet Riot, the guy with the mask.
Yeah, the mask. So scary and weird.
Oh, yeah.
I know. So there was, and Slippery When Wet, my older sister had that. Obviously, Bon Jovi was the bomb.
Of course.
So, you know, that was definitely in, like, if you're in the car or in Walmart or whatever in my small town, like, you know, the music of the day was on. Also, country music, because I was in Northeast Texas. So, like, Garth Brooks, sort of that class of 89, which is an amazing era for country music, which is like, you know, Garth, Alan Jackson, Travis Tritt, George Strait was hot. Like, so some of the best country music, modern, I still consider that modern country, which is probably vintage at this point, classic. Yeah. But anyway, so I was definitely like, the music of my surroundings played a big role, but at home, it was my dad's music. Then Nirvana comes out. So that, and I'm working with Trig Ward, this old blues man. And so I always say the Beatles made me write songs and Nirvana made me start a band. So that was kind of the thing. So then I remember I was at Trig's place and I'm leaving with my guitar and I look at the billboard, like one of those cork boards, you know, we have flyers and stuff. And there was a photo of this kid who looked about my age, standing next to a bass guitar, and the bass was like as tall as him, like on the ground, and the headstock came to him, you know, like it was like he was as long as his guitar. And so and I knew I needed a bass player, because I figured, like, you know, Jimi Hendrix Experience was a trio. Now Nirvana, my new favorite band, was a trio. I'm like, okay, so all you need is like bass, drums, and if I'm playing guitar, we're good, you know. And so I knew I needed a bass player, so I asked Trig. And
so you're like 12?
I'm 12 now.
12.
Yeah, so I'm 12. So, and I'm just really mainly writing on guitar at this point. And so I said, Trig, who's this kid? You know, this, and he said, oh, that right there is Ryan Green. And I was like, okay. He's like, do you want his number? I can introduce you. And I was like, yes, sir, please. And so he gave me Ryan Green's number. So I'm like so excited, because this is like the first other musician that I'm going to get to hang out with, right? My age. And so I call up Ryan, and I said, hey, my name's Ben Kweller. I write songs, and I want to start a band. Like, will you come over and jam with me? And he's like, sure. So he comes over. I teach him one of my songs. We jam. He was a great bass player, like really talented. It's like still to this day, I remember Ryan Green, and can't believe how good.
Was he about the same age?
Yeah, I think he was like a year older, maybe.
Okay.
You know, he might have been 13, but like very talented. At that point, you know, this is early to mid 90s, so it's, you know, like if you were a bass player, you were completely gonna learn how to slap because like Flea was the man, and like that whole funk Spin Doctors thing was the deal, right? I think he even had a 5-string bass, low B, and like that was just the thing, you know, that you did. And he was just very talented. So like so then when he's leaving, I'm like, man, we really need a drummer. So he said, well, I actually know this drummer named John who's amazing. So I call up John David Kent, this kid in my town, and kind of give him the same spiel. My name's Ben. I write songs. I just jammed with Ryan Green. I want to start a band. Will you, can you come and jam with me? And he told me, he's like, oh man, thanks for the call. He's like, man, I just kind of got burnt out. Like I was in a band and our singer just like really wasn't serious enough. And we had a big gig at the high school dance, and he like, you know, didn't show up. And so like, I'm done playing music.
And he's probably like 14.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, totally.
I mean, he had burnt out fast.
Exactly. He was 14. He was 2 years older. And yeah, so he's like, I'm done with music. I'm like, oh, okay, bummer. And I remember Ryan saying, like, this kid John's, like, amazing at drums. And so we hang up, and John's father was kind of in the other room and heard him talk and kind of decline this offer to come and jam with a fellow musician. And David Kent said to his son, hey, who was that? And John said, oh, it was this guy named Ben. He writes songs and wants me to come and jam. But I told him no, and David was like, well, just go. What else are you doing in Greenville, Texas at 14? Like, go and jam with this kid. Like, you never know. So he calls me back, and he says, hey, dude, yeah, I'll come and jam. And so me and my dad drove, my dad had this little minivan, the Astro van.
Yeah.
1988 Astro van, bro. We drive the minivan.
Revolutionized family travel.
Yes, dude, amazing. So we drive to John David Kent's house, and we pick him up. Instant connection as like a friend, right? We go back. We got Ryan Green on bass, and so I quickly show them this song that I wrote called Roller Coaster, and we just go into it, and it was amazing. And that's when my first real band, Radish, was begun. 1994. And so we start rehearsing my songs, and then it's like, okay, well, we need to play a gig, right? That's the next move.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're from a small town, pre-Google era, you have the yellow pages, right? And so I got the phone book out, and I just started looking for like, where the heck it was a dry county, so like there were no like bars in Greenville. It was just like,
Greenville's like in the Dallas.
It's near Dallas. It's north of Dallas, about an hour north off I-30 towards Texarkana. Because there's Greenville Avenue in Dallas, which a lot of people, when you say like, oh, I'm from Greenville, they're like, oh, cool. But it's Greenville Ave is a cool street in Dallas.
Oh yeah,
I'm like from Greenville, Texas.
That's where the cool kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so anyway, Greenville, Texas. So I would look in the yellow pages for places to play. So then I would just like, I remember I'm 12, okay? But damn, like looking back, like I was really enterprising. Like I was an entrepreneurial 12-year-old dude, because I just like wanted to play gigs. Now that was it's like start a band. Now you play shows. Like I just had my career path. I was just like bulldozing this, which is kind of funny, but hey, you can do it today, probably with even more leverage. Like all I mean,
you're riding a vibe for sure.
Riding vibe. So
where'd you find that first gig?
Okay, well, so I first call like the bowling alley. So I'm like, maybe. I'm like, hey, you guys are a bowling alley. I have a band. Can we come and play? And they're like, no, we're a bowling alley. We don't have a stage. And I'm like, okay. I called the Putt Golf. Like, I'm just trying to think of like entertainment places in my town. I'm like, I had a birthday party at the Putt place. Maybe we could play a gig there.
Dude, my little town had Rock and Bowl. Like,
they
picked it up.
See, that's cool. Rock and Bowl, that's the vibe.
And there's no stage. You just go buy the shoes.
Exactly, yeah. So I finally called this place called Chauncey. It was called Chauncey's Place. and it was a pool hall. And so this dude picks up the phone, and I'm like, "Hi, is this Chauncey's place?" He's like, "Yep, this is Chauncey." And I'm like, "Hey, my name is Ben. I have a band called Radish, and we're really good. And I'm 12 years old, but I think that we're better than, like, I don't know, whatever my sales pitch was, because I'm like, I got this adult on the line. I've been turned down by the bowling alley and the freaking putt-putt golf and games place. So this is my one shot, right? So, and I'm like, I think we're pretty good.
The hard pitch.
I'll play you a song right now over the phone. And he kind of chuckled, because like the dude's probably thinking like, my God, like this is a kid on the line, just like desperate for a gig. And so he kind of was like, all right, play for me, like he was just like, just loving this. And so like I grabbed my guitar, old school, you have your phone here and like my guitar, and I probably played him Roller Coaster, which was my jam. That was my main jam at that time. And I play it for him. And he was like, that's really good. He's like, all right, I'll give Radish a gig. You got next Thursday. And I was like, okay, amazing. So that was our first gig ever. That was like our first gig at like a proper venue. But we did do a pool party before that. My parents had a friend, Willie Craven. She had a pool party and we played there. I don't remember when, but probably 93, 94. But yeah, but Chauncey's place, I still have the flyer for that one. So that was like actually a legit gig. And then the story keeps going, and we can keep, I don't know how long I want to
Well, I mean, at some point, somebody heard you and was like, it wasn't Chauncey, but someone
so Chauncey
in the music industry.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, he is good.
So that's where Nils comes in.
Okay.
The artist that I mentioned earlier. So my father grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, and he was a drummer, like as we already know. And he grew up with a guy named Nils Lofgren, and they went to high school together. And Nils is an incredible guitar player. And my dad was Nils's first drummer, and they had a band called the Radical Five. Even though they were a trio back in the 60s, that was super psychedelic. If you were called the Radical Five, there were only three of you up there. You know what I mean? Yes. That was like weird. So that was their band. And and it's kind of funny that they were radical, because then I started Radish, which is no correlation, but it's just kind of funny how things go. But anyway, so my dad played with Nils. Nils went on to become an incredible artist. He released solo records throughout the late 60s. He had a band called Grin, who was super cool garage rock band from the late 60s. Then Nils started doing solo albums, which were really cool and underrated, and more people should listen to Nils Lofgren records. And then Neil Young discovered Nils Lofgren and took Nils on tour to be Neil's lead guitar player. Okay. So Nils Lofgren is in Crazy Horse, which is like Neil Young's backing band. So Nils Lofgren plays on After the Gold Rush and Tonight's the Night, some famous Neil Young albums. And then, of course, he joined the E Street Band back in like 1985, right before Born in the USA was a big hit. So Bruce Springsteen, that was mega, and Nils has been Bruce Springsteen's guitar player since then. So as a kid, when I start writing songs, right, I'm 8 years old or whatever, I would record cassettes of my music, and I'd send like one to my grandma, and then I'd send one to Nils Lofgren, because he was like the only other person I knew that was really doing it, like doing what I wanted to be doing, right? So all that time, from the time I was 8 to like 14, Nils knew what was up. Like, he was kind of like, he would receive my cassettes and call and be like, oh, that sounds really good, Ben. Like, keep it up. You know what I mean?
But he's hearing your progression.
He's hearing the progression.
Yeah.
So then when Radish is formed with Brian Green on bass with his 5-string and John David Kent on drums, we finally, at this point, we would do cassettes. But then at this point, CD technology was like kind of attainable, because like I remember when CD duplication came out, man, you'd go to a recording studio, and if you wanted it on CD, it was like $30 to get like one CD burn. It was expensive.
Yeah.
But then I guess like in 2 years from the time we started on cassette to like 2 years later, the technology became so much more easy, and I guess the market price came down. We could actually duplicate CDs at this point. So I remember we made our first CD. It was an album. It was called Dizzy. And we thought the photo would be cool if we were behind bars. And so like it's like 3 of us behind bars, which is kind of cool. We thought we were tough and cool. And so Nils Lofgren, of course, I sent him a CD, and he was recording an album of his own. And the story that I was told is the producer for Nils's album was walking by and saw the coffee table, and the CD was on the coffee table of these kids behind bars. And Roger Greenewalt, the name of the producer, goes to Nils and I was like, hey, who are these kids? And Nils said, oh, that's my friend's son's band. It's pretty good. Check it out. And so I get a phone call from Roger Greenewalt, who was a record producer. And this is now in like 1995. I'm 14, 15 almost. And I get a phone call. Hey, Ben, my name is Roger. I'm a producer from New York City, and I'm working with Nils Lofgren right now, and I love your band, particularly this one song that he was obsessed with from the CD. He said, I love this song. I want to fly to Texas. I want to record a 3-song demo, shop it around, and get you guys a record deal. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anything. I don't know what you just said, like what any of that means, but sign me up, because like that sounds like my dream, whatever it is. Like no school, music 24/7. Yes, let's do it. So that was it. So literally this guy flies to Texas and takes us to music school. That's what he said. He's like, all right, boys, I'm taking you guys to music school. So we sat for, I think it was spring break. So we had like maybe a week with him, and we took 3 songs and dissected them. I mean, dude, he took my songs apart. He would teach me about the relative minor, which if you don't know about this, you should learn about the relative minor for any of you composers out there, budding songwriters. Like, so if you're in the key of C major, the relative minor of that is A minor, which is the 2nd chord in Heart and Soul, which I, from my story, that was like an important piece. And what's cool about a relative minor is that it's similar to the major key, but it just darkens it. So like, and this is the 90s. So like, it's like peak grunge, like post grunge era music, still a little angsty and like, dark. And so like, he taught me all these different ways to sort of like take certain happy vibes and turn them sad, or maybe you have something that's sad and let's turn it happy. And so, and then not to mention, he would bring out the first time we ever played to a metronome, to a click track, and so like, he was brutal, like with our drummer, like playing with a click. And like, because in these days you still recorded on analog tape. So like, we were going to go into the studio and record 3 songs, but you're recording to a tape machine. There's no computer screen. You can't see the waves and cut and edit it. It's like, you got to play it.
It's all done with ear. You don't see the notes on the tape.
That's it. That's like, and
that dude's got to cut it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you got any edits with a razor blade and like some tape and like, so like the results, and it's funny because like I produce a lot of artists too, and a lot of kids want to record on tape, and I love recording on tape, but like pre-production is so important. You have to get it right before you even record, and that's what this producer was teaching us. Is like, we're working in the room. We're getting it right before we even go to a studio. And that's called pre-production, kids. And so, that's what Roger did. We went to a studio, we recorded the 3 songs, and then he shopped it around, which is the term they used in the music industry, which I still don't really understand why you're shopping, because I would think the person wanting to sign the band is shopping. But anyway, you shopping.
It's like the Walmart comes to you.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess he hooked us up with a music attorney. Yeah, amazing dude, Jonathan Ehrlich, who I haven't spoken to in probably 25 years, but great guy. And Jonathan started sending it to these record labels, and then before you know it, the phone started ringing at my parents' house, and people were asking to speak to Ben. And I was 15, and then this is crazy, but like then limousines started showing up at my parents' house in Greenville, Texas, because these record company people wanted to meet me.
They were like competition,
and it really started like this whole thing. And like, this is still the 90s, so it's like pre-Napster, pre-MP3, pre-iTunes, pre-YouTube, pre-Google. It is like compact discs sold for $14.99 at your local, record shop, Best Buy maybe, or Hastings, or your mom and pop record store. And so there was still quite an industry, you know, there was like still money being made. And so they could afford to like fly out to Greenville, Texas and take a limo to this kid's house. And
which would all happen over Zoom now.
Which would happen over Zoom now, yeah. Only after the artist already had 100,000 followers, you know, on TikTok. Or like,
I think there's a good kind of like segue here to you know, Noise Company.
Yeah.
And you know, so with Beat for Beat, you know, we're a big part of like what I want to do is give a lot of musicians move to Austin. You know, they know it's a music town, and they're like, you know, if I'm gonna give this music thing a shot.
Yeah,
I'm coming in, right?
Yes.
So, you know, every year we hire people who are not Austinites, they moved here. And so, you know, we give them, you know, gigs.
Yeah.
So they're able to do what's a big thing. I'm like, you know, yeah, you're going to have to, you know, shovel some coffee, but like, come teach.
Yes.
Because you're going to be working in and around music. Like, you want to do as much music as possible while you're doing this stuff. But, you know, a lot of people are so green. And now, you know, if somebody asks me, who's been in education for the last like 10 years, like, how do I do this? I don't know. I know the model you just talked about.
Right. Yeah.
But, so talk about like, you know, I guess let's just kind of start like, hey, I'm a songwriter.
Yeah.
You know, I've got my laptop. I've got some ideas for songs. Like,
starting
what
there,
do I do?
Okay, so starting there, the number one most important thing is create music that is unique and original. So like that's the end of the story. And until you do that, then we can talk about the next steps of getting it out into the world.
Right.
But you know, and whatever gets you to that point, I'm not saying that like you just learned a few chords and you need to start writing something original and groundbreaking. You know, it might start with like learning how to play covers and learning how to play Beatles, and you got to put in your 10,000 hours, as they say, you know? And so like, you know, and if you, even though it's kind of absurd that like I did my first record deal when I was 15, right? Which sounds ridiculous. But if you really look back at the story I just told you, I started playing drums at 7, wrote my first song at 8. So 8 to 15, what's that? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's like 7 years, 6, 7 years. And I was obsessed.
And you're driven.
Nonstop. Writing songs, learning how to play guitar, working on piano. What's my band going to be called? What's the artwork? Like 6 years is a long time. So like, even though it's kind of crazy to think from 8 to 15, like you're a baby, and you are. But like, if you do anything for 6 years, you're going to be really good at it, you know, like whatever it is. So anyway, what I'm saying is like, your goal needs to, the first goal is to create music that is unique and original, that is different, you know? And look, it can have similarities to other music, right? Like we always want to play stuff that we like the sound. Like, you know, I get compared to, you know, early on I got compared to Nirvana a lot because like that's what my favorite music was. And like obviously there was a big Beatles reference, you know, and like a lot of times I get compared to Tom Petty or Neil Young or Bob Dylan or this or that. But like that's all music that I love, you know, and it is a tradition. We kind of mentioned earlier like who was the first to do it. It doesn't even matter. It's like it's not where you take it from, it's where you take it to, right?
So like, you know, when I first heard your music, I think the uniqueness that came across from you is like I can hear your voice. Like I feel like you are really speaking from the heart, even though like your first song was like, I don't know, I'm writing about love. But at some point you figured out like I'm talking to people.
That's true. And like I have been told that when I meet fans, they're like, you talk like you sing, you know, it's kind of funny. And so maybe and that this is a thing I think with all artists, we always ask ourselves like, what am I as an artist? Like, am I original? Do I have a thing? Like, what is the Ben Kweller sound? Like, I don't know. But I think over time, you would ask fans of Ben Kweller, they probably could explain what that is. To me, it's a little all over the place because I do love all different types of music. So I think that variety is part of the Ben Kweller sound because I might make a country record or a rock record or a piano ballad here or an acoustic folk thing there. So variety is important. But anyway, long story short, yeah, it's just like musically, you want to set yourself apart. If you're doing something that's too close to what everyone else is doing, no one's going to care about it. That's the other thing. And this, to get real nerdy on it, and I only realized this like maybe in the last few years, you start, because I go down different rabbit holes. This is the other thing. Like, so when the record deal happened, and I'll try to not lose my train of thought, but I do want to say this. I did the record deal with Radish. We signed with Mercury Records. And I was 15. So now I was contractually obligated to go on tour, which for me, I'm like, yes, that was the whole thing, right? But what that meant is I can't go to school. So what I had to do is I took my GED, okay? And so I was a freshman in high school. I finished my freshman year, so I was about to start sophomore year, 10th grade. I took my GED. Essentially, I dropped out of high school at 10th grade and went on tour, okay? Which is pretty heavy to think about. But I've always striven to like learn, and I think I felt a lot of sort of insecurity early on about being like leaving school so young. Like maybe I'm missing out on something, or I'm uneducated, you know what I mean? And so I've tried to compensate that with like, I've always had a real hunger for learning, luckily. So that's kind of cool. So again, like kind of self-taught, where I'm trying to full circle this for you guys is I go down different rabbit holes where I just get books like philosophy or like religions or whatever it is, you know, stuff I don't know about. And like, so I went through an economics phase, like what is economics and how does money work in the world, right? And that's fascinating. And so then you start learning about like a market-based economy and like why certain things, you know, why it kind of, and you can equate it with sort of like virality on the internet too. Like why are certain videos 1 million streams, but then we put out a video and like only 2 people saw it, you know, and there's certain things like that. And so what I'm getting to is like, when you learn about how markets work, which is so nerdy for artists to talk about markets, I'm fully aware of that and I'm sorry, but it's kind of something I learned recently. When you learn about markets, you realize how, so like, there's so many things I want to say, but like the barrier of entry, is it barrier to entry? Barrier of entry. Maybe that's the phrase. Barrier to entry is so easy now. Like it's so easy to get your laptop, open up GarageBand, record your song, upload it to TuneCore. Now it's on Spotify and Apple Music. Like that, you couldn't do that 20 years ago. Right? And then, you know, 30 years ago, you had to have a record deal. You couldn't even be an independent artist, right? So these days you have access to becoming an artist, but what that also means is that there are so many artists that what we call, it's like supply and demand in the market speak. Like there's so much supply and that decreases the demand, right? So that's why I say that like, if you really want to like get into music, you have to think about, and you don't have to, but if you want to be competitive and actually do this professionally, I do believe you have to strive to make something unique and different, because otherwise what is the, and I hate using the word product because I'm an artist, but like people in the business world are going to ask you this. How is your product any different than her product or his product, or, you know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, you know, being like a music education world, I get that all the time. You know, how are you different than this other group that teaches music? And, you know, at first I was like, what?
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
But now it's like, you know, now I've got the pitches ready to go.
Yeah,
depending on
totally.
who I'm talking to.
And yeah, that takes time. And that takes time as a songwriter to like learn to find your voice.
You know, and one of the things that, you know, we'll do like staff meetings, and I try to like, you know, talk about what's going on in the class, but I also try to offer up skills.
Yeah.
Right. And I always think of that, that term, like this isn't show friends, this is show business. And it's like, you know, you do have to have the talent. And, you know, we probably all know like some really talented players that no one's ever heard of.
Oh,
because it's like, you got to get out the door. You got to call Chauncey's, and
you
got to hustle.
Totally.
So it's like the two things have to go
You
together.
have to go together.
Yeah.
So I remember as a father, like when Dorian, my oldest, was really getting into music, or just like maybe we were talking, it was like related to school. He was, whatever it was like a music thing. He wasn't putting in the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a big talk about like talent and motivation, and I was telling him, like, I have known some musicians. There's one guy I'm thinking of, a guitar player who's just probably one of the best guitar players I've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
He also happens to be the laziest person I've ever met.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
this dude can pick up a guitar and play anything, and it's like so much soul and so much vibe. And I've worked with him a bunch, and like it's like always so beautiful. But I always thought, like, dude, like if you just had a little bit of motivation, like you would be like the top, like, dog. You know what I mean? Like whatever that is today. But so that's what I remember as a dad, like talking to Dorian about this and like saying, like you're naturally gifted, because he was like, he had, and my son Dorian passed away, which is just a tragedy that happened last year. So that's why I'm talking about him in the past tense. But I remember talking to Dorian when he was probably like, 13, 14, and just being like, dude, you're naturally gifted at music, If you put some drive behind that, you could be unstoppable. Because there are a lot of musicians who aren't naturally gifted, but they're willing to put in the work, and they will surpass you. Like, you don't have to be born with natural talent to learn how to play music. You can learn, someone can teach you drums, and if you put in your, 6 years or 10,000 hours, you'll be a great drummer. Now, if you are born with natural talent and you have that drive, that's really what makes Michael Jordan's and Serena Williams's, like that's the Tiger Woods stuff. Like, yeah. And so, that's, like that's the next level thing, which, I don't think that I'm that, but, it's kind of a cool thing to think about. And it's sad when you meet a talented kid who is squashing it, and then you meet a kid that's not talented, but they're so determined.
I tell like the teachers who are, that come through there, and like I'm, for me, I toured and kind of was 3 levels down from you. Like I might have opened up for you at 7 p.m. while the first 5 people were there.
All right.
And but I was, I tell people, like, think about, like, when you need a plumber, it's like there's one guy on the top of the list you're gonna call every time. You need to be that guy.
Yes.
Or girl.
Yes.
Like you want to be the first one. I can depend on them. Yes. They're gonna learn they're gonna learn their parts. Yes. They're gonna show up on time. They're gonna nail it. And it's like there's that part of it. Yeah. Like the talent is only gonna get you so far.
That's so true.
You gotta hustle.
And also the personality, and like the hangability, like in the professional setting of music. I mean, I deal with this all the time with artists that I mentor, or whether I'm producing a record or like working with them, like on sort of like a consulting, like managerial basis, or if they're signed to the record label, like whatever it is, it happens so much where it's like someone will be like, dude, like, my drummer, he's the best drummer. He's my best friend. But it's like, God, he doesn't show up for rehearsal, or he doesn't, he's just like unreliable, or it's someone, man, our bass player, she's amazing, but like, she's just not fun to be around. And like, it's hard, like a hard hang, And so I always tell people, like, life on the road and as a touring musician or a professional artist, it's about the 23 hours you're not on stage that matter more than the 1 hour that you are on stage. We all say, dude, it's all about the music. It's all about the show. And it is really, at the end of the day, it is all about the music. Mm-hmm. But when you do this professionally, you start to realize that those 23 hours that you're not on stage and you're living with someone in a van or on a tour bus or at a hotel or wherever, you gotta like the people you're with, So, man, there are drummers, I can just think of session drummers in Nashville, might not be the best drummer, but I have a friend, he's actually a great drummer. He's both. He's the whole package. But it makes you realize that, like, even if this guy wasn't the best drummer, he's so fun to be around and so easygoing and takes direction. Like if he is a producer, like, hey, play it this way. Awesome. I will. Like no ego. Those are the people you want to be around almost more than the best players, because it's at the end of the day, it's like this social human interaction and we're all trying to achieve something. So if you're a young musician, man, try to just take it easy and be easy to be around if you can, you know?
You know what? I don't know why my mind just went back to when you were talking about music school.
Yeah.
Because I could tell you like the difference when I first started, you know, I was writing music with friends and we would go out and gig and this and that. And then, you know, I thought we were like on top of the world. I go back and listen now. I'm just like, ooh, that was a little eerie, a little scary.
Yeah.
But, you know, when I got into like the kind of wedding bands, tribute bands, and studio work, I was like, you're putting in that time. Like you have to play with the metronome.
Yes.
And, you know, as a guitar player or a drummer, like it's not just hitting it on time. It's like,
The feel.
that feel and this and that. And you know, one of the things that I think about with like your kind of laptop artist, it's like, man, you still need to put that time, that music school time in.
Yeah.
Because, you know, and I've done some engineering and I've put people, you know,
put them through music school,
put them on the metronome and it is not happening.
No.
And it's like, hey, I'm sorry, but like, you need to go home and practice with the metronome. And come back
seriously
when you're ready.
Yeah,
because this is what's gonna make you like presentable.
Yes.
That and like you mentioned, like being on the road, those gigs, like just playing gigs.
Yes.
You know,
That's it. And it's one thing to, you know, practice sitting on your bed in your bedroom, you know. Now doing that on stage in front of 3 people in the audience, like that's the gig it's all about the gig, you know? Yeah. It's like if you're an athlete, like if you play tennis, like, and I love tennis, that's why I bring it up. But like, you know, you can do as many clinics with like a coach and they can feed you balls and you get your top spin going. Yay, cool. But like when you play a real game, a real match, you know, against someone, like that's when all of a sudden your whole everything falls apart. You don't forget you don't remember how to play.
Well, the pressure's on.
Yeah,
eyes are on you.
Totally,
you've got to perform.
Totally.
And I think, you know, as a musician, it's like when you get kind of put through your paces and kind of get humbled a little bit.
Yep.
Like if you can rise above that, like you're going from like this person with these great ideas to like an artist.
Yes.
That it's like, okay, now we've got something.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And you know, we're a music school too, so I should say music school. Times.
Music school, man.
Like, so I wanna kind of pivot a little bit to mental health.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we all just went through trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the pandemic put us all at home.
Yeah.
And people didn't know what to do. A lot of people are changing careers and this and that. So as we kind of come out of, as we came out of COVID as an organization, we were, you know, facing the mental health crisis like head on.
Yeah.
And so I want to kind of ask you a couple questions about like, you know, for your own personal, you know, journey, how does music, I just want people to know like how, like what great medicine music is.
It's the best medicine. Like, you know? I don't think I'm the epitome of mental health, probably. I have no idea, but I do know, I feel in my bones that music has probably saved my life. And specifically songwriting. For me personally, it's about songwriting because that is my favorite thing to do in music, is to create a new song that wasn't here 5 minutes ago. Mm-hmm. Just like being with my instrument and writing a song, writing lyrics, you know, it allows you to think about kind of things that you've been going through, or maybe it's stream of consciousness lyrics. you don't even know what you're talking about. But a lot of times you'll look back years later and say, oh, I remember what I was going through, and now that makes sense. So I've always wanted to keep a journal, and I've tried, but I always give up after like a day or two because it's just like so laborious and like, oh, I'm just,
Yeah, who am I talking to?
Right, yeah. And it always, yeah, exactly. It always just, I just could never, but I've always written songs. And so I realized somewhere along the way that, my songwriting is kind of my journal keeping. So I'm grateful for that. And yeah, so I think that it's definitely played a huge role in my mental health preservation, is just like, having music and in my life and just creating it. It's a great outlet.
Yeah. And, I saw your show at this last ACL, and I probably hadn't seen you perform in a few years. But like I felt, obviously we've already mentioned that you just had some big trauma, but I could feel kind of you going through a healing process on stage.
Yes.
And I was kind of thinking, like, obviously your journaling is your songwriting, but you're also on stage making music with these other guys, and I was like, that was one of the best shows I've ever seen, because like I could feel you.
Man, thank you. That's so cool to hear that it came across that way, because that's exactly what it was, and that band playing with me, the guys I'm playing with right now are really special because they knew Dorian, and they loved his music. We were all just rooting for him. Dorian Kweller, his project was called Zev, and we put out like 5 or 6 songs while he was here, and luckily on his laptop there's a bunch of music unreleased that we're going to start putting together for a Zev album. But
producing it in this amazing studio.
In this studio, which he loved this barn. He never got to see it like this while he was here, but I know he's checking it out now, and he's really stoked for us to have this space.
And how does it feel like for you to like preserve his legacy? I mean, you must be going through a lot.
It's the only thing I know how to do. I mean, I feel very lucky that there's so much of him that we can share with the world, I mean, this music that he left behind, and his spirit. He was such a good friend to so many different people. Like it's funny, like our joke in 2nd grade, he got the friend to all award in 2nd grade. And like, it was kind of funny because we were just like, yeah, Dorian, the friend to all, but he really was like that. Teacher back in 2nd grade really spotted it in Dorian, because like by the time he was in high school, he was friends with like so many different people. He didn't care if you were like a jock or like a hippie or like an emo kid or like whatever. Like he was just liked you for you, and that was it. Like he didn't believe in cliques or scenes, or he was just like a different kid, just sort of out of the box.
So y'all have formed a foundation.
We formed. Yes.
I want to welcome you to the nonprofit world.
Yes. The nonprofit world is new to us. It's called Zev United. We were going to call it the Zev Foundation, but I actually learned with a person that helped us set up the organization, there's a difference between foundations and charitable organizations. And I guess foundations don't really usually have missions. They mainly just donate to good causes, but we really wanted to have a mission, so we're the charitable organization route. So it's called Zev United, and basically we're raising money to support the 2 favorite things that Dorian loved, which was music and skateboarding. So our thing is like, we're all about finding like young talented skaters and musicians, and how can we support them and help them. And one thing that we're really excited to announce this year that we're starting on the music side is at the Austin Music Awards this year, which is February 25th, I believe, are the Austin Music Awards. We're announcing a new award called the Zev Award.
Oh, nice.
And so that is going to honor a musician or group, it could be soloist or ensemble, but under the age of 18, because there's nothing really currently in the Austin Music Awards aimed towards the younger gen. So the Zev Award's going to be that, and I'm really excited about that. And then on top of that, the winner of the Zev Award every year is going to get $2,500 from Zev United to like buy a microphone or a laptop, or however they can spend it however they want. That was a big important thing for me, is like I didn't want it to be strings attached where like you have to do a certain amount of school hours or this project. Like, no, man, like you're an artist, we got you, here's money, go and use this for your passion, you know? So I hope that I'm excited to see how that all turns out.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean that just kind of ties back to your 12-year-old self who was like on a path, and those piano teachers, they're just getting plowed over.
Exactly.
Like, no, yeah. Right. So it's like,
and having a Nils Lofgren in my life that we happened to be able to send a CD to, and then that ended up getting to a record company, right? But like these days, like the to get a record deal, it's like, even if you wanted a record deal, like I don't even know how many artists want a record deal. Like it's just such a different thing now. But you still need some funding and you need help, because I mean that's one thing Mercury Records did for Ben Kweller and my band Radish, like was they invested in us and put money behind us so we could go and tour. And so we could make albums. I mean, that is expensive. Like, it's expensive to be on the road, especially when only 10 people are coming to see your band. Like, you're not selling out venues. But you need, and no one's buying your CDs back then. But you had, that's called being a developing artist, And so that's the difference. And we can go back to, like, how it is today versus then. But, $2,500, you can do something with that, And so... I hope to, help these artists out, whoever they are. Each year there will be a winner that'll get this award, and that's something to help, because the record company dream, it's not really there anymore.
I mean, when I kind of like hung up the original band dream, it was probably like 2012, and we had like a record deal.
Yeah.
And I was already like 30, and I was like,
yeah.
Ooh, this is not good. Like, this is not a good business decision to take this record deal. And it kills me to say that because I grew up in that era.
A record deal.
Where it was like, hey, we're going to develop you.
Yes.
Like, here's money.
Yes.
And here's connections. And we're going to put you on tour. Mm-hmm. And this and that. The deal that we got presented was like, wow, like we're going to all need full-time jobs still to do this.
Yes.
But we're on the hook.
I know.
Yeah.
What is that?
So it's like, and that was, 10 years ago. I don't think that it's gotten any better.
If you're viral, it still exists.
Yeah. People are still getting
there's
hits.
Big record deals. And there's hits. And people are getting signed. It's just... Like, remember we talked about like how the market's flooded with artists, so it's like to rise above, that's the key, right? And so that goes back to being unique and like, what's your thing?
Well, and I guess a good kind of person to talk about is like Billie Eilish.
Yeah.
She basically
incredible
made that album, her first album, with her brother in a bedroom.
Yes. And what's interesting is like the music was unique, and her style of singing no one had really recorded like that, where it's like a low octave, a high octave, whispering.
Oh yeah.
It's like surprisingly quiet, but it's still like jams in a way. So like there's like already we just mentioned like 3 or 4 elements that made that really unique and interesting.
Right, and you feel her,
and you feel her, and it feels organic and authentic. Yeah. That's the thing. And like I love. Like what you told me about my music and how you feel my voice and hear me, that's like the best compliment I could get, because all the artists I love, if I think about a common factor between the Tom Pettys and the Neil Youngs and Steve Malcolm from Pavement and Kurt Cobain and Bob Dylan, Neil Young, like all of those artists, when they sing on record, you feel like you're hanging out with them.
Yeah.
That's important to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, I love super pop music. Like the other day I had Mariah Carey on in here. I was just jamming, cleaning the space to Mariah Carey. But like, you don't really feel like you're getting to know Mariah Carey. although she's like an incredible vocalist and it's like incredible musicianship, like no one can sing like her. Like she's like Michael Jordan of vocals, right?
Right.
But like, but to when you can really feel like you know the artist, that's big. Like I with Post Malone, I kind of feel it when I hear that. I'm trying to think of pop artists now.
Yeah,
there are a few where like, okay, Billy's one of them. Billie Eilish, you're like, okay, like I feel like I know her now. Yeah, that's an important factor. So be authentic. You know, that's so crucial.
Yeah, nobody's going to accuse Neil Young or Kurt Cobain of being like amazing singers.
No.
But they are like some of the most successful artists.
That's it.
You know, and it's like,
that's it.
Because I feel you.
That's it. Jimi Hendrix apparently hated his voice, but he was the biggest Bob Dylan fan. And he was like, you know, if Bob Dylan can do this, I'm going to start singing. And apparently Bruce Springsteen, the same thing, loved Bob Dylan and was like, but it was like loved him, loved the lyrics, but also was inspired like, wow, you don't have to be the best singer to get your message across, you know? It's just about having a vibe. You just got to have a vibe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Putting your authentic self
so,
out there.
Yeah, that's it. Man, it's a lot.
Well, a big part of our thing is, of course, working with kids. So
yes.
we've got some questions for you.
Okay.
From some of our students.
Amazing.
Some of the kids in the neighborhood. And these are hard hitting.
Good. Bring it.
I mean,
I'm ready.
I felt like I needed to edit them down. I was like, wow. Dude, that's personal, man.
Okay.
All right. Good. So we're just gonna get started here.
Okay.
Hey Ben, what's your favorite song that you've played before?
What's your favorite song
that you played
that you've played before?
Whoa. Oh, that's
hard.
There's so many ways I could answer that. I know. So I'll just give you a moment that comes to me. Okay, just right there. Okay. I once, probably one of my favorite gigs I was invited to play was me and the Flaming Lips with the Violent Femmes headlining. And the Femmes are one of my favorite bands, okay? And I remember I was living in New York City at the time, and the show was going to be in Chicago, outdoor amphitheater, huge show. And I was over the moon because I love the Femmes. And I was doing a radio interview with a DJ in Chicago. And he's like, dude, so like, and it was well known. When I came out early, I would always talk about how like the Violent Femmes were one of my favorite bands because they really were, because they were like this acoustic punk thing. Yeah. That I just found, again, very unique. Like that's a unique artist. When you hear the Violent Femmes, you're like what
genre are they?
Right.
Don't know.
Exactly. Don't know. And so that like was amazing. And so anyway, this DJ at the Chicago rock station was like, dude, so like you're playing with the Violent Femmes, one of your favorite bands, like what do you think? And I'm like, dude, it's amazing, like I can't wait, this is so cool. He's like, awesome, I'm about to interview them next, I'll tell them that you want to play with them. Yeah. And I'm like, no, don't do that, because then I'm like scared, you know. I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. So then he's like, all right, I won't tell them, blah blah. So a month goes by, we show up to the gig in Chicago, and I see Wayne Coyne, because I knew the Flaming Lips, we had already been friends and stuff. And we're like, what's up, dude? And we're hanging. And so then the bass player from the Violent Femmes walks by and he said, hey, you're Kweller. Hey, I heard you're going to play a song with us. And I'm like, wait, what? And I was like, no, I don't know. And I almost chickened out. But my bass player, Josh, was like, dude, you got to do it. Like, this is your favorite band. Like, what a dream. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And then the other guys from the Violent Femmes walked up and they're like, all right, well, what song are we doing? And I said, let's do Add It Up. And so, which is like a classic off their debut album, like one of my favorites. So favorite song I ever played was Add It Up by the Violent Femmes with the Violent Femmes in Chicago on stage.
You got to be with your hero.
Yes. And I just I feel like I jumped up and down smiling the whole time on stage playing that song.
That's one of those times where you're like, I don't want to listen back to the audio.
Yeah, exactly. No good. Oh, it was horrible.
Hey Ben, what's your favorite color?
Oh,
what's your favorite color?
So I've gone back and forth about this over the years, and I just keep coming back to red. Red just kind of does it for me, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's my favorite one.
Yeah. Red's awesome.
Red's a great color.
I like your Fly Kite album.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
The tab is in red.
How did you learn to play music?
I mean, we talked about that.
Yeah,
but like,
it was.
give us the abridged version.
Yeah, I mean, I learned how to play music because my dad said, Ben, I'm going to teach you how to play a drum beat. And so he told me that rock and roll, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, and do it again. And just keep counting to 4 over and over again. And your hands play on certain numbers. And that's how I learned how to play music.
That is actually really difficult for some kids. So, like, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
For picking that up.
Yay.
I know we have a drum instructor here.
Yes.
That 1, 2, 3, 4 thing, that's
It
tough.
gets them every time. It's a hard thing. I mean, I think having a sense of patterns, pattern based, and again, like visual things, those all work, all those senses kind of work together in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, it helps.
How much do you practice?
Oh, that's a good
that
question.
is a good question.
It's a good question.
Let's say, how much did you practice when you were little versus like, what are you doing now? What's your practice regimen now?
Yeah, so not as much as I should now. Because life gets so complicated as you get older.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's so many other things that are like competing for your time and attention, you know, and time starts going a lot faster as you get older. It's really weird. And so when I was your age, whoever you are, who I just answered your question, but basically I practiced like probably most of the day. You know, if I wasn't at school, I was at home practicing, playing my piano, playing the drums, playing the guitar, singing, working on songs. So yeah, I mean, it was all practice all the time, you know. Nowadays, I have to be really intentional about my practice, and I basically schedule time. So I try to do like Thursdays and Fridays are just like create music days.
Mm-hmm.
And so Monday through Wednesday is usually more business oriented stuff. So I really have to be intentional about the days when I'm practicing.
So you got to go to the grocery store. You gotta, you know, there's some housework to do. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff.
Know.
Adulting. It's so hard.
It's a real thing.
Where's the best place have you ever played?
Where's the best place have you ever played?
Yeah.
Japan, for sure.
Yeah.
Tokyo, Japan's my favorite. And I've toured there a few times, and we're actually booking a tour right now for 2024 back in Japan. Australia is pretty amazing too. You get to see the kangaroos in real life. But Japan's my favorite because it was the most foreign, different from America vibe. Because Europe is cool. I mean, everywhere is fun. You know, every place is so exciting and fun. Even in America, like all the different states, there's so many cool cities and food's a big driver for me in my travel, you know, and that's what's so fun about touring. If you like to eat, I love trying all the different foods.
Hey, don't talk too much about food. I think you might spoil another question.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't spoil it, but I'll just say that I do like food. But I'm not telling you what my favorite is, but maybe I will one day.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, Japan's my favorite.
So the Japanese audience, they're not speaking English.
Nope.
Are they singing back to you?
They're trying sometimes, but also sometimes they're really like a good listening audience, you know? But like when you do interviews like this, like I would have a translator with me for sure. And it's funny because you would ask her or him the question, and then she would ask me in English, and then it's like a whole three-way thing. Japan.
Do you have any advice for kids learning to play guitar like me?
For what? Kids learning?
Any advice for kids learning to play guitar
like me?
Like her.
Okay. I'm thinking about the hand on the neck right now. And like it really like learning guitar is really annoying because it's like it like hurts your fingers. It's like physically tough where the piano isn't as much. So my advice is really just to not give up. Like, it's kind of like you really gotta work at it and build up you gotta get your calluses. You've probably heard about getting calluses that develop on the tips of your fingers because you're touching this metal wire and you're trying to squeeze and it's so hard. So it's like a lot of that is just building up strength with your left hand. So my advice is don't give up and really like learn those bar chords and really learn, like, just own it, you know?
Yeah. Guitar has a long on-ramp.
It's got a long on-ramp.
But the payoff is so good.
That's it. It might be like snowboarding. I've heard that snowboarding has like a real hard learning curve.
Yeah.
But once you get it, it's easy.
I've only fallen off snowboarding, so
There you
I
go.
didn't take that
You
approach.
didn't? No. You gave up.
I did.
So
Easily.
that's like right before learning the F bar chord, you gave up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, a lot of people like to give up on those bar chords,
Oh.
but it's like, don't do it.
don't do it, dude.
You're opening up your
Don't
world.
do it.
What kind of guitar do you play, dude?
Dude.
What kind of guitar do you play, dude?
Dude.
I mean, we're surrounded by guitars.
I got a few guitars. I'll show you two of my favorite guitars.
Yeah.
Okay? Stand by. What kind of guitar do you play, dude?
Yeah, dude.
And so this is called a Gibson SG. Well, I was going to say special. This one only has one pickup. If it had two pickups, it would be an SG special. But this is basically a junior model guitar. This type of pickup is called a P90 pickup, and this is a very special pickup. It sounds like heavy metal razor blades, and like, I don't know, it's really a cool rock sound.
It's got the devil horn.
Yes.
It's like so rocky.
See how rock and roll that is? So anyway, this is one of my favorites, and I play these a lot. And so there's that. But the other one that I play... Oh, and I'm just showing you electrics right now. We could do a whole thing about acoustics. This might be my favorite guitar of all time. And this is called a Fender Swinger. And it's an extremely rare guitar. And I remember when I was a kid, about your age, I had a coffee table book called like 40 Years of Fender Guitars, you know, and every page was a different guitar. The Stratocaster, the Telecaster, the Jaguar, the Jazzmaster, the Mustang. And there was one page where it showed this thing. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is that? And basically, this guitar was made in 1969. They only made it for 1 year, and they used leftover parts from other guitars that they had lying around. So anyway, I always wanted one. I was in a music shop in Seattle, Washington, in the early 2000s on one of my first tours, and they had this hanging on the wall.
Oh, wow.
And I asked the shopkeeper, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like a real Fender Swinger. How much is it? And he said, not for sale. And I'm like, really? And that was a thing that they used to do at vintage guitar shops,
Yeah.
like back in the day. They'd have guitars out and then be like, oh, it's not for sale. And I'm like, well, then don't put it out because that's just heartbreaking. Well, you're just bragging that you have these amazing guitars. Well, anyway, so it turns out the owner of the store was like, well, it's not for sale because the owner of the guitar is in jail.
Ah.
And so like he's like doesn't want to sell it while he's in jail, but he might get out. It was like a whole weird situation. And I'm like, well, look, let me give you my phone number because if he ever sells it, let me know. Anyway, maybe like 2 years later, I was back in Seattle. Sorry, I ramble forever, but you can edit this. Every time I'd go to Seattle, I'd call that guitar shop and say, hey, this is Ben Kweller. That blues Fender Swinger, it's my dream guitar. Like, is it for sale? Finally, they were like, yeah, the guy's out of jail and he'll sell it to you for $1,500.
Ah.
And back then it was a lot of money, but it was like worth it money. Like it wasn't like too out of reach, you know, 1,500. And so I got a Fender Swinger. And so this is my favorite guitar, and it's actually a very cool sounding guitar. So quick pro tip, see how the pickup is here closer to the neck, where with the other guitar, the pickup is closer to the bridge. Okay, So when it's closer to the neck, it's a warmer sound, and it's more of like a rhythm for like strumming your guitar, where when it's back here, it's more like, we call that like more of a lead sound and more of that rock. So this has a very warm sound. I would say it's very similar to like a John Frusciante of the Red Hot Chili Peppers vibe. Look up Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge, that guitar, and this sounds a lot like that.
That is, so you said that's made from like leftover part. I mean, there's like Fender P-bass.
It's made,
I think, on there.
well, it's made from mainly Mustangs. I'm gonna get this out of the shot. Mainly Fender Mustang and Duosonic, which is another weird.
Yeah,
do you know about the
never heard-
Duosonic?
I don't
It's
know that
weird.
one.
It's a small junior size guitar.
Oh, wow.
Short scale.
Yeah.
So that's it. Those are SGs and Fender Swingers, and then for acoustics, Gibson J45s, and that's all I got.
You're a single pickup guy, too.
Yeah, single coil.
Yeah.
I've never been a humbucker guy.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
They actually always sounded quieter to me when I would plug them in. There's
It's just kind of like, what sound am I going for? But, you know, in the studio, obviously I have a lot
can
of
do all
guitars,
different things,
stuff,
yeah.
but those are the ones you like to play
the single
live.
coils, I think, because they're just noisier and they just scream a little more. I think that's what I like about them.
Yeah.
They're more reactive.
Yeah.
Whereas humbucker just kind of is a little more tamed, which I've been told that it shouldn't be that way. Like maybe, like, I don't know.
Well, we are tangenting here, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Like every guitar, just like we talked about feel on the drums, everybody plays different. And I know I play different than other guys. And, depending on, how you're picking it or strumming it or whatever, it's going to react.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
What makes your music rock and roll, man?
Oh, what makes your music rock and roll, man?
That's
That's a very good question. I think that, rock. I always think of rock and roll as sort of like a counterculture. I mean, it started out as like a very sort of like against the grain art form.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, what makes my music rock and roll is probably more in the lyrics and just sort of like this element of like questioning things and maybe questioning authority and just like wondering how the world works and maybe just like being determined to do your own thing and to be original and be your own person. And like all of those things are very rock and roll to me. And then obviously if you add some like aggressive sounding guitars and some, but it's more, sometimes rock and roll is more than just the sound of it, It's more like the feeling and emotion.
Yeah.
Is a rock and roll feeling.
Counterculture. I mean, that's how it started.
Yep.
Rebellion against our parents.
That's it.
What else do you like to do besides playing rock music?
Oh.
What else do you like to do?
You got hobbies?
I have a lot of hobbies.
Yeah.
I have things that I really like to do. I don't always have time to do all the things that I like, but things that are my favorite things, camping and hiking. I love nature. I love being outside. I love fishing. That's me growing up in Northeast Texas. I like collecting baseball cards, and even coin collecting is something that my dad was really into.
Wow.
So he got me into like coins, and there's a big word for that. It's called numismatics. So when you're a numismatist, you are a coin collector. So
We'll have to spell that out.
I think there's like some silent G's and N's and things in there. But so coin collecting is something that I used to love to do with my dad, and I still have a coin collection. And one thing that, with this studio where we are right now, and I've been setting up the recording console and everything, I've been getting into, like, I have like a newfound love for the art of recording. And so I've been reading books on mixing and audio engineering. And so that's kind of my new hobby, is like, I never learned how to engineer music or record properly. I've always just done it by feel. And so now my new hobby is like learning how to be an engineer and a mixing engineer. And so that's really cool to like have this newfound love for something that I already loved.
There's so much science and physics behind, mic placements and sound waves and all of that. So it's like, that's a big world.
It's a big world. So and that's another thing. It's like, and maybe it's part of my 2024 New Year's resolution, but it's like, really think of the things that bring you joy and like, what are you passionate about? And like, what's your purpose on earth, And mine, I really do feel like it's make music. So I'm trying to make that feel like a hobby, which instead of just like a job,
Yeah. That is something you say that I've like made my music the center point of my career. And there has been periods where I'm just like, man, I do not want to listen to music. I don't want to touch my instrument. Like, it's my job now.
I know.
But you got to come back.
Yeah. And try to remember of like why we fell in love with it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How'd you become famous?
Dang. Oof. How'd you become famous?
You got the record deal.
It wasn't an overnight thing.
Yeah.
I will say that. Like, I think that a lot of us we watch TikTok and we watch Instagram and we think that like we see all these musicians like just getting famous overnight and we think that like that's how it's supposed to happen. But I've learned that there's no such thing as an overnight success. And I heard a story that was really kind of interesting. There's a famous swimmer named Michael Phelps, gold medalist, Olympian swimmer. And I heard an interview with one of his coaches or maybe it was like a friend of his, whatever it was, I remember watching the Olympics when Michael Phelps, like we first heard of him and we're like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. And he like won all the gold medals and like he's an amazing swimmer. We're like, overnight, like who's this Michael Phelps? Well, this interview I heard was like, well, I've known Michael since he was 4 years old. And I know that he used to go to the swimming pool at like 6 a.m. every day for like 10 years of his life and swimming and all he did. So it's like all of you in the world think of him as an overnight success, but I've seen it, and so it's kind of like my story that I mentioned earlier, like from the time I was 8 writing my first song to the time I was 15 getting my first record deal. That's not overnight, No. And so how you get famous, what I think is like it's like building blocks. It's all these little pieces put together. That's how I think probably to get a good quality type of fame.
Infamous.
No, exactly. Because you could get famous overnight for doing things that probably aren't good.
Yeah.
But if you want to be recognized for your talents and for something positive, it's going to take it's not overnight.
Did you feel it? Did you feel it like in your first Radish album or your Ben Kweller
Radish
solo?
I felt it when probably in my hometown. I felt it when the Radish album came out. Once we signed our record deal, like the first major label release, we did an in-store at Hastings and a bunch of people, like it was a packed record store. And that's when I feel like I kind of was like, wow, this is kind of a big deal. And we did like an autograph signing. I was like, whoa, like that's a thing. And then I think next was going to the UK, the United Kingdom, and like going to the venue to play our first gig in London. And there was a line down the street and like kids, when we got out of the van, people freaking out and crying and like running and getting photos and autographs. That was where I was like, okay, this is different.
Yeah. Famous from your talent and hard work.
Yeah, I hope.
Do you write your songs?
Do I write my songs? Oh, yes, I do. And sometimes I write them with friends, too. Sometimes I do co-writes, like collaborations. But yeah.
You've got some famous collaborations, right?
Yeah. I've done some writing with different artists. Me and Rhett Miller from the old 97s. I have a song on his album. I've written with the band Hanson. There's a pop singer. Oh God, what's her name? Well, we'll edit that in. But yeah, one of the big ones that I did was Ed Sheeran. I wrote a song with him called Collide, which is on his last album, and that was cool. I did a collaboration with the Foo Fighters. I didn't write the song, but I sang some vocals with Dave, which was really cool.
Yeah.
But I write my own songs.
Yeah.
Yes.
How much money do you make?
How much money do you make?
How much money do you make?
Just going in for it.
Personal.
Well, yeah,
question.
I mean, it's
Answer however you like.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I will say that like I've been very fortunate. Like I feel like I'm able to do what I love, and I can support my family off of it. Music is sort of feast or famine. Like it goes up and down. You know, like there are years where like I only make maybe like $40,000 to $50,000, you know, like a teacher's salary. And then there's been years where I've made $1 million. So it's the key. One of the keys for music, for me, like to sustain, is to find ways to create as much steady income as possible. And that's really hard to do in music, but I do things like I have my fan club, which is a subscription that's paid, and they get these perks in return. And so that's like some steady income that I can rely on each year. Also, as a songwriter, there are things called royalties. So whenever I have songs that have been in TV shows or in movies, and those are on TV, I get performance royalties. And so that comes once a month. There's a check that comes in the mailbox, and sometimes it's $500, sometimes it's $3,000. But it's always kind of in that range. And like when I budget out, I try to budget money with, I have a financial team and people that I work with, and we try to predict how much money I'll have each month. I mean, this is like adult stuff, but you know, it's really important because that's the other thing. I'm self-employed, right? So like on one hand, I get to call the shots and like do what I want, but I also have to be disciplined about like money because I can't spend all the money, you know. I need to like, so with royalties, we budget about $2,000 a month as income from that. And then record sales, like streams, my record company usually pays me about $2,000 there. I mean, it's kind of give or take. Now, concerts is where you can make the most money. When you're in my position, I guess that's where I would say the most money comes from. And that kind of ranges too. Like there's a range, whether it's like a private event versus a public event. But yeah, so I don't know. I would say like usually it's like between $5,000 and $10,000 a show is kind of the range, depending.
Yeah.
And then you have to pay your band, and you pay your crew. Like that's the other thing. People hear the top number, which is called gross, but then there's the bottom number, the net number after you pay all the expenses. It's just like any other business. So
yeah,
it's not all money in the bank, you know?
So in short, $1 million.
There you go. Every day. I make $1 million a day.
No, I mean you're in survival mode.
Well, that's it.
I'll never forget a kid I was teaching guitar to was like, so what's your real job? And I was like, what do you mean?
What do you mean, man?
And he's like, well, you know, and what he was getting at was like, you're here playing guitar, so obviously you don't make any money.
That's so funny. Wow.
And I was like, no, you know, I have a house,
doing good,
a car,
bro.
like,
Yeah.
and you know what? I'm hanging out with you.
That's it.
You know, and that's better than money.
That's amazing.
But yeah, there's ways of making money
There
at
is.
all
Oh,
levels.
So many. And I do want to just say that reminds me of like, I think, you know, when we think about when you're in high school and like guidance counselors and like their job a lot of times is to like recommend like maybe what school you're going to go to or what you're going to study. And I think that there's a real gap in our current education system where like when a kid might be interested in a certain industry, whether it's medicine or film or music or art, there are so many jobs within that industry that you don't even know exist yet. And I hope that like a lot of counselors who help funnel kids into the workplace can really help them look outside of the box and find certain Like maybe you're into music, but maybe you're not going to be a songwriter or a guitar player, but you might be a producer or like a business manager in music, or you know what I mean? So anyway,
I think there's a, and you're speaking to me because the original name of this nonprofit was Beyond the Grade, and that was it. You know, I felt like, you know, I did a traditional high school to college route, and it was like, okay, you graduated, go to college, pick your major.
Yep.
And there wasn't a lot of thought that I had put behind that. I'd pick a major.
Yep.
I was obviously doing music all the time, but
yeah, exactly.
But I picked a major, and I think we need, you know, for these young people, like find someone like a mentor.
Yes.
Like if you want to be music,
find a musician or someone that knows.
Or someone that knows that could tell you like this is what it's really like.
Totally.
Check it out. This may or may not be for you.
I know. And that's or if you're an artist and you want to learn about comics, like there's a lot in the comic world, or even video games. Everyone wants to be a gamer, but actually there's a whole ecosystem of stuff other than just playing the game, and you can be involved in video games and really cool ways.
There's a lot of audio engineering jobs.
Totally.
It's all around recording music, you know.
Exactly.
So
all right, let's keep going.
Do you make music with other people?
Oh,
yes, I do.
We already talked about that.
Yeah, we did. I make music with other people all the time. I write songs with other people. I play music with other people. It's much more fun with friends. Everything's more fun with friends.
Definitely. Do you write songs that you are solely for other artists? Like, hey,
sometimes.
Here's a Ben Kweller.
Yeah.
Sometimes you sing it, perform it.
Totally. Sometimes I write a song that I like, but I know it's probably not for me, and then I'll send it to different people and see if they like it. Yeah. And sometimes they're like, I'll record it.
And they pay you for that?
So that's a little complicated. So for songwriting, you get paid after it's already come out and performed on TV. Remember, like those royalties? That's usually you don't get paid a fee for a song. Now you can get a buyout, but then your name wouldn't be associated with it anymore. I mean, there are people, I guess, ghostwriters that like give me a few $1,000s and you could have the song. That might exist. I don't know about that.
You know,
maybe in the hip hop world, I know people buy beats.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
yeah, that was one of the things that, you know, as I was kind of like finding my way in independent music, it was like, oh, I can make these beats, which is just making music.
Totally.
And shop them out. People will buy them.
Yeah. That's cool.
That's money.
What's your favorite food?
There it is.
My favorite food.
Your favorite food.
Oh, man. My favorite food is Ethiopian food.
Woo!
Have you ever had Ethiopian food?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a new one that opened up, Taste of Ethiopia, too, down on Congress.
So
we used to go north of the river. There's a place, Astor's, on I-35, North Austin. But now,
what's the one downtown?
Called Taste of downtown?
Right.
I don't know the one downtown. But I just know Astor's up north, and then the one south, Congress. Taste of Ethiopia too, which I love, and it's so fun, and you eat with your hands, with the spongy bread, and it's like just so good, so tasty. It's a lot like Indian food, which is another favorite.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Indian food's the best. But yeah, Ethiopian is my favorite. I also love Japanese food, but it's hard to pick. I love it all.
I know.
But I'd say Ethiopian right now is my favorite food.
How'd you fall in love with music?
I fell in love with music because of the Beatles. That song, All You Need Is Love, that's what I heard, and it turned into All You Need Is Music to me, I guess, and that was it.
Yeah.
Beatles. John Lennon's voice.
John and Paul and the whole
thing.
The whole
what
Fab Four.
Fab Four.
I mean, that was
what a
lightning in a bottle.
Yep.
Inspired so many people.
When did you start music?
When did I start music? Well, I started when I was 7, when my dad taught me how to play drums. That was really it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before that,
I think maybe someone showed me Heart and Soul either before the drums or after the drums. I can't quite remember when, but
I find like 7 is a good age for young men.
Yeah, okay.
To kind of get started.
Yeah,
if they're into it.
Yeah,
it's hard.
7.
5 and 6.
Yeah,
our brains are kind of out there.
Yeah, totally.
But 7, you're starting to focus in.
What
on
about
stuff.
for girls? Can they do it earlier?
I have noticed that young girls can focus earlier.
They're smart.
And if they're into it,
Yeah,
they're
right.
always smarter.
They're always smarter.
If they can focus in,
yeah.
Those girls
cool.
can start real early.
That's so cool.
But boys, we
need a little time.
There's a little
we're
wild
we're too
side.
wild.
Yeah. I think that was our last.
That was awesome.
I do have another question for you from that realm.
Okay.
What is your favorite animal?
Ooh, my favorite animal.
Yeah.
Ooh. What? I think my favorite animal is the wolf.
The wolf?
Yeah. Wolves are really cool because they're very fast and they're just interesting. They mate for life as well, so they're like really loyal to their pack. I like that. And actually, Dorian's middle name was Zev, which means wolf. My middle name is Lev, which means heart. And so when he was born, we named him Dorian Zev Kweller. I'm Ben Lev Kweller. So Lev and Zev is the heart of the wolf. So together we're the heart of the wolf. And so, yeah, the wolf's my favorite animal.
Nice.
They're interesting.
Let me ask you a follow-up. We're out here on a ranch.
Yeah.
Do you have any cows, horses?
So there are cows and horses next door. My neighbor, they have cows. There's a neighbor down the road that has horses. We had chickens for a while, but our chicken coop had a hole in it, and they kept getting killed by raccoons.
Mm-hmm.
Raccoons are bad kids, man. They are really cunning. And there's coyotes out here that you don't see very much, and fox as well. The thing about coyotes, they're kind of like wolves. They'll take a chicken and take the chicken back to the pack to feed the family, which I'm cool with. It's sad for the chicken, but at least they're putting that chicken to good use. The raccoons, they just come and decapitate the chickens and cut their heads off and just eat their heads and leave the chicken there dead without a head.
Wasteful.
That's so mean and wasteful.
Wasteful.
So raccoons are a little rough, man. I'm not big on the raccoons.
Let's say
they look cool.
Not your favorite animal.
No, my favorite. Yeah. Snakes are a little sketch too. I'm a little scared of snakes. But...
Yeah. Well, it's important that you have cows and horses nearby because you get to pet them.
Yeah, totally.
And
we have our dog and we have our cats. We have 2 cats and they're so fun. I like
dogs
kittens.
and
Cats, dogs. Yeah.
Let's put a pin in this, man.
That was really fun.
Yeah, I just want to say we haven't mentioned Liz at all, but when you guys brought me in to teach, like I could tell like you and Liz are like such a great couple, and there's probably not a Ben Kweller without Liz.
That's so true.
Can I?
Yes. We got to give Liz props. I mean, she has been with me since the beginning of my solo career. I had the Radish experience, and then I met Liz towards the end of Radish, and she's been with me since I went solo, and really since I came into my own, just as an adult, really. I mean, we've been together for so long, like 25 years, and we've learned a lot together, and she's taught me a lot, and I've taught her some things, and we've grown together. That's huge. Having a companion to go through life with is really, really cool.
Yeah, you're very fortunate. I could tell, I would come to your house and teach the kids, and you guys had a really nice ecosystem over there. A couple of things stuck out.
Yeah, give it to me.
Ben Kweller's, over there doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Taking care of things.
Nice,
man.
Bro.
And I'm like,
you got to.
And I'm like, dude, this is good.
Okay.
Rock star attitude here. He's going after those dishes.
You got to go after the dishes. Totally.
I love it, man.
That's cool that you noticed that. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
You got to divide and conquer when you're in it with someone else.
Yeah.
Significant other, It's like you just pick the jobs and Routine is like, that's the other thing, just life hack stuff, you know, adulting and being an artist. Like, as an artist, you can do anything, right? Like, you can write any kind of song, you can play any kind of music, but like, when you can do anything, it's really hard to like pick on something to do something, right? And so for me, like in my life, my day-to-day life, it's really important to have set up routines and set up sort of like some guardrails that helps me as an artist to be as creative as I want. Like, it's important that my whole life isn't completely out of control, because then I would just feel like, I don't know, it would be a little too much.
Yeah, you guys were
funny.
So like normal
Awesome.
in your home. I was like, there's no rock star attitude here.
No,
Someone's
never.
doing laundry. Someone's washing dishes. Who's cooking the food tonight? I remember meeting your mom, and she was so nice over there too.
Yep.
So yeah, man, you got it going on. So
family vibes are strong.
So let's see, where can we hear your music?
Yeah, so you can hear my music on Spotify and iTunes and YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. You can just type in BenKweller, and you'll find my music. You can also go to benkweller.com, and then you can go to The Noise Company. You can go to their Instagram. You can go to their website, thenoisecompany.com, and that's a record company and management agency in the music business that I started about 10 years ago. We have a lot of cool artists, and my music comes out through there. And then, so there's a few places, but just, you can Google me and you'll find it.
It's all on Google. There's a lot of good YouTube stuff out there.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
And now this interview will be up there, which would be exciting.
It'll be out there in the internet world.
Awesome.
All right, cool, bud. Awesome.
Yay. Bye, y'all.
All right, guys.